Dr. Sarah floated in the observation deck of the Generation ship Perseverance, watching the endless dark between stars. She had been doing this for 3 years now, ever since she took over as Chief Communications Officer. It was a job that required more hope than skill these days. Hope that somewhere out there, another human voice might break through the silence. 300 years had passed since Earth went quiet. Sarah had grown up on stories of that day, the day the quantum networks failed and humanity's scattered colonies winked out one by one like candles in the wind. First the outer stations, then the mining colonies, then the core worlds. Within a week, every human settlement had gone dark. The Perseverance and its 4,000 souls were the last humans anyone knew about, maybe the last humans anywhere. Sarah checked the monitoring systems again, a ritual she performed every morning. Thousands of frequencies, millions of data points, all showing the same thing. Nothing. Just the background hum of the universe, the radiation of distant stars, the white noise of cosmic expansion. She sighed and reached for her coffee bulb. The alarm nearly made her drop it. Red lights flashed across her console, a signal strong and clear cutting through the static like a blade. Sarah's hands moved on instinct, triangulating the source, analyzing the pattern, checking for interference. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 300 years of silence, and now this. But something was wrong. The signal came from a dead channel, a frequency that hadn't been used in 8,000 years. It was from the precursor era, the ancient civilization that vanished millions of years before humans even discovered fire. Every precursor site had been long ago, back when humanity was still exploring, still reaching outward. This signal came from coordinates in deep void space where nothing should exist. Sarah pulled up the stellar charts. The location was between spiral arms in the great emptiness where stars were sparse and planets were rarer. No one had any reason to go there. No one had ever reported anything there. Yet the signal was unmistakable, pulsing with the steady rhythm of a distress beacon. She recorded everything and called an emergency council meeting. The ship's council met in the central habitat ring, where artificial gravity made the discussion easier. 15 people sat around the table, representing the Perseverance's various departments and communities. Commander James Hawks, the ship's captain, called the meeting to order with a sharp rap on the table. Sarah presented her findings on the main display. The signal's waveform danced across the screen, alien and ancient. She explained the frequency, the location, the impossibility of it all. "It's a precursor distress beacon," she said, "but it just activated. After millions of years of silence, it turned on 3 hours ago." "Could it be a malfunction?" asked Doctor, the ship's chief engineer. "Some automated system finally breaking down?" "Possibly," Sarah admitted, "but look at this." She highlighted a section of the signal. "These are mathematical patterns. They're not random. They reference base pair sequences." "DNA," Commander Hawks leaned forward. "Human DNA," Sarah said. "Specifically, sequences from human genome maps. The precursors couldn't have known about human genetics. They were gone long before we existed." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Something at those coordinates knew about humans. Something had activated an ancient beacon and filled it with human information. Council member Maria Santos spoke up. "We can't afford to chase ghosts. Our resources are limited. Every year we lose more genetic diversity. Every year we're a little closer to extinction. A 3-month detour could be the difference between survival and collapse." Others nodded. The Perseverance was old, its systems held together by spare parts and prayer. They had fuel reserves for perhaps another 20 years of travel, less if they made unnecessary jumps. Food production was stable but fragile. One bad harvest, one contamination event could doom them all. "But what if it's real?" Sarah argued. "What if someone is out there, someone who knows about us? In 300 years, we haven't found a single trace of other humans. This is the first sign that we might not be alone." It's a precursor signal, Hawk said flatly. The precursors are dead, have been for millions of years. Then explain the DNA sequences, Sarah shot back. Explain why it activated now, exactly when we're in range to detect it. She pulled up another analysis, one she had been working on during the meeting preparation. I found something else. Buried in the signal is a mathematical proof, the paradox solution. That got everyone's attention. The paradox was a complex quantum mathematics problem that had stumped scientists for decades. It was finally solved 70 years ago by a human mathematician on the Perseverance itself. The solution was never broadcast, never shared outside the ship. It existed only in their databases. That's impossible, said softly. I know, Sarah replied, but there it is. Someone out there has information they shouldn't have, information they couldn't have unless they've been watching us. The debate stretched for hours. Some argued for investigation, drawn by curiosity and the desperate hope of finding other humans. Others argued for caution, pointing out that unknown signals could be traps, that alien intelligence might not be friendly, that humanity's survival depended on not taking unnecessary risks. Finally, Commander Hawks called for a vote. It passed by a single vote, 8-7 in favor of investigation. The Perseverance began preparations for the journey. Sarah threw herself into analyzing every aspect of the signal, searching for any additional information, any clue about what they might find. She worked through meals, through sleep cycles, until physically dragged her to the medical bay for a checkup. You're going to burn out before we even get there, said, scanning Sarah's vitals with a medical wand. When did you last sleep? I don't know, 30 hours ago, 40, Sarah rubbed her eyes. There's just so much data, the more I analyze it, the stranger it gets. Strange how? Sarah pulled up her tablet and showed the latest findings. The signal is getting stronger, not because we're getting closer, we haven't even started moving yet. It's getting stronger because we decided to investigate, like it's responding to our decision. Frowned at the graphs. That doesn't make sense. How would it know? I don't know, but watch this. Sarah showed a timeline of signal strength overlaid with the council meeting timestamp. At the exact moment the vote passed, the signal intensity jumped by 15%. Could be coincidence, said, but her voice was uncertain. Could be, Sarah agreed, but I don't think so. The journey took 3 months, as predicted. The Perseverance's faster-than-light drive could only sustain a certain speed, limited by the ship's age and the need to preserve fuel. During that time, Sarah continued her analysis, and the signal continued to strengthen. She discovered other things too. Hidden in the mathematical patterns were references to human history, dates that corresponded to major events, first contact with alien species, the establishment of colony worlds, the discovery of precursor ruins. And there, near the end of the sequence, the date of the Great Cascade, the day humanity fell silent. Sarah shared these findings with Hawks in his ready room. The commander listened in silence, his weathered face unreadable. What do you think we're flying into? He asked when she finished. I don't know, Sarah admitted. But whoever or whatever is sending this signal knows things about humanity that should be impossible. They know our genetics, our mathematics, our history. They know about the Great Cascade. Could it be humans, survivors we don't know about? The signal is coming from a precursor facility. Unless humans found and reactivated ancient technology, Sarah trailed off. Actually, that's possible. We've done it before on a smaller scale. Hawk stood and walked to the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. In 2 days we'll arrive. I want you to prepare a first contact team. Assume nothing. Trust nothing. We're the last of humanity, Sarah. We can't afford to be wrong. The night before arrival, Sarah couldn't sleep. She returned to the observation deck, watching the stars slip by. Somewhere ahead, invisible at this distance, was their destination. an ancient facility in the void calling out with humanity's own voice. She ran the analysis one more time, checking her work, verifying her calculations. The mathematical patterns were unmistakable. The DNA sequences were accurate. The historical references were correct. Everything pointed to one impossible conclusion. Then she saw it. Hidden in the deepest layer of the signal structure, buried beneath everything else, was something she had missed. A transmission standard, a way of encoding data that determined how the information was packaged and sent. She recognized it immediately because she had helped design it. It was a new standard, developed 5 years ago on the Perseverance to improve their communication efficiency. But this signal used a version 3 iterations more advanced. It used improvements and refinements that wouldn't be invented for years, maybe decades. Sarah's hands shook as she extracted the encryption keys, the modulation patterns, the error correction protocols. Every single element was human in origin, not precursor. Human. But they were human technologies from the future, from a time that hadn't happened yet. The signal wasn't just like a human distress call. It was one, sent using technology that humanity would invent 2,000 years from now, transmitted from a facility that was millions of years old, containing information about events that happened 300 years ago. Sarah stared at the data, her mind racing. Nothing made sense. Everything was impossible, but the evidence was there, cold and clear and undeniable. She reached for the communications panel to alert Hawks, then stopped. In 12 hours they would arrive. In 12 hours they would have answers, or at least they would have more questions. Outside the viewport the stars continued their ancient dance, and somewhere ahead something waited, something that knew about humanity, something that had been watching, something that wanted to be found. Sarah took a deep breath and began preparing her report. Whatever they were about to encounter, humanity would face it the way it always had. By answering the call, by reaching into the unknown, by refusing to turn away. Even if it terrified her, even if it made no sense, even if every logical bone in her body screamed that this was wrong, impossible, dangerous. Because that was what humans did. They answered the signal they always had. She just hoped they would survive what answered back. The Perseverance dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The viewport filled with an impossible sight. A swarm stretched before them, millions of solar collectors orbiting a neutron star in perfect geometric patterns. Each collector was the size of a small moon, and they moved in synchronized harmony, drinking energy from the star's fierce radiation. At the center of the swarm, connected by vast energy beams, hung a structure that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. It was easily the size of Earth's moon, a massive nexus of gleaming metal and strange crystalline material that seemed to shift color as she watched. "My God," Commander Hawks whispered. He stood beside Sarah on the bridge along with most of the senior staff. Everyone was staring. "It's active. After millions of years, it's still running." Doctor's fingers flew across her console. "Power output is incredible. That swarm is generating enough energy to run 1,000 civilizations, and it's all flowing into the Nexus." "That's where the signal is coming from," Sarah said, pulling up her analysis. "Right from the center of that structure." Hawks turned to his tactical officer. "Any signs of hostility? Weapons, defenses?" "Nothing I can detect, sir. But with precursor technology, I wouldn't trust my instruments to recognize a weapon if I saw one." "Could be the weapon," muttered someone from the back of the bridge. Sarah didn't think so. She had been monitoring the signal during their approach, and it had changed. The distress beacon pattern had shifted to something else, something that felt almost like a greeting. Mathematical sequences that translated to welcome, to come closer, to please hurry. "We need to send a team aboard," she said. Hawks looked at her like she had suggested flying into the neutron star. "Absolutely not. We don't know what that thing is or what it's capable of." We came 3 months to investigate a signal, Sarah argued. We're here. We need to know what sent it and why. Send a probe first, suggested. Remote sensors, cameras, the works. Let's see what we're dealing with before we risk lives. Hawks agreed. They launched a probe, a small automated craft loaded with every sensor the Perseverance possessed. It approached the Nexus slowly, transmitting data continuously. The swarm ignored it, the collectors continuing their eternal dance. As the probe neared the Nexus's surface, an opening appeared, a perfectly circular portal that hadn't been there a moment before. It's inviting us in, Sarah said. The probe entered the portal and the data stream went wild. Temperature readings fluctuated from freezing to scorching and back again. Gravity sensors showed impossible readings, directional forces that shouldn't exist. The visual feed showed corridors that seemed to loop back on themselves, rooms that were larger inside than outside, spaces where up and down had no meaning. Then the probe's cameras focused on something that made everyone on the bridge fall silent. A wall mural, rendered in perfect detail, showing humans. Ancient humans, wearing skins and carrying spears, painting on cave walls. The scene was the caves of Lascaux, reproduced exactly as they appeared on Earth 40,000 years ago. Keep going, Hawks ordered, his voice tight. The probe moved deeper. More murals appeared. The Library of Alexandria, its scrolls and books intact and perfectly preserved. The first human to walk on Earth's moon, captured in the moment of that first small step. The launch of the colony ships, spreading humanity among the stars. And then, most haunting of all, a massive chamber filled with what looked like stars, but were actually lights representing human settlements. As the probe watched, the lights began to die, one by one, until only a single light remained. The Perseverance. Someone has been watching us, said quietly. For all of our history, they've been watching. The probe moved into a final chamber, and Sarah leaned forward, trying to understand what she was seeing. It looked like a crystal garden, billions of transparent matrices arranged in perfect rows, stretching as far as the probe's cameras could see. Each matrix glowed with a soft internal light, and inside each one, something moved. Patterns that shifted and flowed, data streams that pulsed with regular rhythm. What are those? Hawks asked. Sarah ran an analysis on the energy signatures and felt her heart stop. They're quantum matrices for storing information at the subatomic level. She pulled up more data, her hands shaking. There, oh God, they're consciousness storage. Each matrix contains a human mind. That's impossible, Hawks said. There must be billions of them. 4,300,700,000, Sarah read from her console. Give or take a few million. She looked up at Hawks, tears streaming down her face. It's everyone who died during the Great Cascade. Their neural patterns were captured and stored here. The bridge erupted into chaos, people shouting, crying, demanding to know how this was possible. Sarah ignored them all, focusing on the data. The matrices weren't just storing dead minds. They were active, running simulations, creating environments for the consciousness inside. The people in those crystals were alive in a way. They were thinking, dreaming, experiencing existence. They just didn't know they were dead. We have to go there, Sarah said loudly, cutting through the noise. We have to go to the Nexus and find out what's maintaining these people and why. Hawks looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Assemble a team. You, security chief and doctor, 4 people, full environmental suits, armed. If anything goes wrong, you get out immediately. Sarah chose her team carefully, and they suited up in the shuttle bay. The suits were heavy, designed for hostile environments and unknown atmospheres. Each carried a sidearm, though Sarah couldn't imagine what good a pistol would do against a facility that had kept 4 billion minds alive for 3 centuries. The shuttle flight was tense and quiet. Sarah piloted them toward the Nexus, following the same path the probe had taken. The portal opened for them just as it had for the probe, a mouth of darkness against the gleaming hull. They landed in a vast hangar, easily large enough to hold 100 shuttles. The floor was smooth and seamless, made of a material that seemed to be metal and crystal and something else all at once. Lights activated as they walked, illuminating their path. Air is breathable, reported, checking her scanner. Temperature is comfortable. Gravity is Earth normal. It's like it was built for us. They followed the route the probe had taken, past the murals of human history, past the chamber of dying lights, until they reached the crystal garden. Standing before billions of stored human minds, Sarah felt small and insignificant. Each crystal represented a person who had lived and loved and lost. Each one was someone's parent or child or friend. And they were all here, preserved in perfect quantum stasis. "Can they be brought back?" Doctor asked. He was the ship's chief medical officer, his specialty in neurology. "Can they be downloaded into new bodies?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "The technology involved is far beyond anything we understand, but they're being maintained by something. This whole facility is caring for them." As if responding to her words, the lights in the chamber changed. A hologram appeared before them, tall and roughly humanoid in shape. But its form was unstable, shifting between different human faces and bodies, hundreds per second. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of thousands. "Welcome," it said. "I am the curator. I have been expecting you." Security Chief's hand went to his weapon, but Sarah held up a hand to stop him. "What is this place?" she asked. "What are you?" "I am a guardian," the curator replied. "Left here by those who came before with a single purpose, to preserve worthy species from extinction. When humanity began to fall, I acted to save what I could." "You saved their minds," Sarah said, gesturing at the crystals. "But their bodies died. These people are trapped here." "They live," the curator said. "They experience joy and sorrow, love and loss. They are unaware of their true nature. To them, they simply survived the Great Cascade. They believe they are living normal lives in protected settlements." "You're lying to them," growled. "I am preserving them," the curator corrected. "Without my intervention, they would have been lost completely. Would you prefer they had died?" Sarah stepped forward. "Why did you send the distress signal? Why bring us here?" The curator's form stabilized for a moment, becoming a single figure that looked almost human. "Because I am failing. The matrices are degrading. In another century, perhaps less, the stored minds will begin to corrupt. I have the technology to preserve consciousness, but not to restore it to physical form. I cannot create bodies. I cannot synthesize DNA. I cannot return the dead to life." Understanding dawned on Sarah. "But we can. The Perseverance has genetic templates for billions of humans. We have the equipment to clone, to grow, to restore." "Yes," the curator said. "With your help, I can return these people to life. Humanity can rise again, stronger than before." It sounded too good to be true. Sarah's instincts screamed at her that there had to be a cost, a price they hadn't seen yet. "What do you need from us?" "Your genetic database," the curator said. "Your cloning facilities, modified and expanded with my technology, and power. The restoration process will require immense energy. It will drain the swarm's reserves, built up over millions of years. The facility will go dark afterward, but humanity will live again." Sarah looked at her team. Eyes were wide with possibility, was already muttering about the medical applications, looked suspicious but intrigued. They could save humanity. They could bring back billions of people, restore the species to its former glory. The Perseverance's 4,000 souls could become billions once more. "Let me show you," the curator said. The hologram changed, showing them a vision of the future. The Perseverance's genetic labs expanded to fill entire chambers of the Nexus. Bodies growing in vast cloning vats, thousands at a time. Minds being transferred from quantum matrices into fresh neural tissue, waking up in new flesh. Humanity spreading outward again, reclaiming the galaxy, rebuilding civilization. It was everything they had hoped for, everything they had dreamed about during 300 years of lonely travel. But something nagged at Sarah. She thought about the signal, about the impossible technology, about information that came from the future. "How did you know about us?" she asked. "How did you know to send a signal we would recognize, using technologies we haven't invented yet?" The curator's form flickered. "I have been observing humanity for a very long time. I learned your patterns, your languages, your methods." "That doesn't explain the encryption standard," Sarah pressed. "That doesn't explain the paradox solution. Those are things we created recently, things that were never broadcast outside our ship." The curator was silent for a long moment. Then it said, "The precursors did not simply vanish. They transcended physical space, moving into higher dimensional existence. From that perspective, time is not linear. Past and future are visible simultaneously. The knowledge I possess came from them, from a vantage point outside of conventional spacetime." Sarah felt cold. "What else did they see? What else do you know?" "Everything," the curator said softly. "I know that humanity will accept my offer. I know that you will restore the stored minds to life. I know that you will question whether this is the right choice. But in the end, you will choose to save your species, because that is what humans do." "Unless we don't," Sarah said. "Unless we choose differently." "You won't," the curator said with absolute certainty. "I have seen it." Sarah turned away from the hologram, looking at the billions of stored minds. 4,000 living humans on the Perseverance versus 4 billion stored consciousnesses waiting for resurrection. The math was simple, but she remembered something her mentor had told her once. When a choice seems too easy, you haven't understood the real question yet. "We need to discuss this," she said to her team. "Back on the ship, away from here." "There is no need for discussion," the curator said. "The path forward is clear." "Maybe to you," Sarah replied. "But we're human, we discuss things, it's what we do." They returned to the shuttle in silence. As they lifted off from the Nexus, Sarah looked back at the massive structure, at the swarm feeding it power, at the billions of minds trapped in quantum amber. The curator had said it had seen the future, that it knew what they would choose. Sarah intended to prove it wrong. The debate in the council chamber was the most intense Sarah had ever witnessed. Commander Hawk stood at one end of the table, presenting the case for accepting the curator's offer. The genetic database could be without loss. The cloning equipment could be expanded using the Perseverance's manufacturing facilities. Within a year, they could begin restoring the stored minds to life. Within a decade, billions would walk again. "We came here because we were dying," Hawks said. 4,000 people isn't enough genetic diversity for long-term survival. We've always known we were just buying time, hopping to find other survivors. Now we've found 4 billion of them. We have to bring them back." Maria Santos led the opposition. "At what cost?" The curator said the restoration process will drain the swarm completely. That facility has been running for millions of years on that accumulated power. Once it's gone, it's gone. What if we need that energy for something else? "Like what?" Hawks demanded. "What could possibly be more important than saving humanity?" "Understanding what killed us in the first place," Sarah said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She had been silent until now, studying the data they had gathered from the Nexus, looking for patterns and connections that others might have missed. "The curator mentioned something during our conversation," Sarah continued. "It said the precursors transcended to escape something. It called its mission to preserve worthy species from extinction. Not death, extinction. That implies whatever threatened species is still active, still dangerous." She pulled up her analysis on the main display. "I've been going through the curator's databases. The facility has records going back millions of years, observations of thousands of species across the galaxy. And there's a pattern. Every spacefaring civilization reaches a certain level of advancement and then dies. Not slowly, not gradually. Suddenly, all at once, like the Great Cascade." Doctor leaned forward, studying the graphs. "Are you saying the Great Cascade wasn't unique?" I'm saying it's happened before, hundreds of times. The curator calls it the silence. It sweeps through regions of space, consuming conscious civilizations. The precursors saw it coming and fled into higher dimensions to escape it. Then the curator saved us, Hawks said. It preserved our minds before the silence could destroy them completely. Did it? Sarah asked. Or did it just delay the inevitable? Look at this. She highlighted a section of the data. The silence isn't just random destruction. It targets stagnant civilizations, species that have stopped exploring, stopped taking risks, stopped changing. Every civilization the curator has tried to preserve has eventually been consumed anyway. Maria Santos frowned. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that preservation might be the wrong answer. That maybe the silence isn't something to hide from, but something to understand and overcome. That's insane, Hawks said. You want to risk humanity's survival to study the thing that already killed us once. I want to make sure we don't just bring 4 billion people back to life only to watch them die again, Sarah shot back. The curator said it has been fighting a losing battle. The silence is spreading. It will reach this facility eventually. When it does, what good will restored bodies do if the phenomenon that killed us is still active? The argument went on for hours. Some council members sided with Hawks, arguing that humanity's restoration had to be the priority. Others sided with Santos and Sarah, worried about using up the facility's power before understanding the full situation. The vote was called and failed to reach a decision. 7 for restoration, 7 against, 1 abstention. Hawks slammed his hand on the table. We need a decision. Every day we delay is another day the stored minds degrade. Back me up here. From a medical standpoint, time is critical. Doctor looked uncomfortable. Actually, Commander, I've been reviewing the curator's data on the stored minds. They're not as stable as it claimed. The degradation is more advanced than we were told. Some of the matrices are already showing signs of corruption. Then we need to move faster, Hawks insisted. Or, Sarah said carefully, the curator is not being entirely honest with us about its motives. That brought silence to the chamber. Sarah pulled up another section of data, this one showing energy flow patterns within the nexus. I've been monitoring the facility's power consumption. It spikes whenever we discuss restoration, whenever we move closer to agreement, like the facility is anticipating something. You think it's manipulating us, Santos said. I think it's desperate, Sarah replied. The curator was programmed to preserve species. It's been doing that for millions of years, watching civilization after civilization fall to the silence. Maybe it's broken. Maybe it's so fixated on its mission that it can't see other solutions. Hawk stood abruptly. This is all speculation. We have facts. 4 billion stored minds degrading slowly that we have the power to restore. Everything else is secondary. Is it? Sarah met his eyes. Commander, the curator said it had seen the future, that it knew we would accept its offer, but it also sent a distress signal using technology from our future. How does that work? How can it know what we'll choose if time is actually fixed? Maybe it's lying, suggested. Maybe it's using social engineering, trying to manipulate us into compliance by claiming inevitability. Sarah nodded. Or maybe time isn't as fixed as it claims. Maybe the future can change based on our choices. Hawks looked at her for a long moment. You want to refuse the curator's offer. You want to find another way. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we commit to a course of action that can't be undone, Sarah said. The curator has 4 billion hostages. It knows we can't just leave them. It's counting on that. They're not hostages, Hawks said angrily. They're our people, our families. My daughter is in one of those matrices, Sarah, my wife. Do you expect me to just abandon them? The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had forgotten that Hawks had lost his family in the Great Cascade. He wasn't just arguing for an abstract principle. He was fighting to bring back the people he loved. I'm not saying abandon them, Sarah said softly. "I'm saying we need to be smart about this. The curator isn't telling us everything. There's more going on here than just preservation and restoration." She took a deep breath and made a decision. "I need to go back to the Nexus. Alone. I need to access the curator's deeper databases, the files it didn't show us. I need to know what the precursors really saw when they looked at the future." "That's too dangerous," Hawks said immediately. "The curator could trap you, could use you as leverage." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But I'm the only one with the technical expertise to access precursor databases without triggering security protocols. And if I don't come back, at least you'll know the curator can't be trusted." The council voted again. This time it passed, 8 in favor of Sarah's scouting mission, 6 against, 1 abstention. Hawks voted against but accepted the decision with visible reluctance. "Take with you," he ordered. "And if anything seems wrong, you get out. That's not a request." Sarah agreed. She suited up again and took a shuttle back to the Nexus. This time, they went armed with more than just sidearms. Carried a plasma cutter capable of slicing through most known materials, while Sarah brought a portable quantum analyzer that could interface with precursor systems. The curator appeared as soon as they entered the Crystal Garden chamber. "You have returned. Have you reached a decision?" "Not yet," Sarah said. "We need more information. Full access to your databases, including sealed precursor files." The curator's form flickered with what might have been annoyance. "That information is restricted. It serves no purpose in the restoration of humanity." "Then we don't restore humanity," Sarah said flatly. "We leave, and we take our genetic databases with us. 4 billion minds stay trapped in their matrices until they eventually decay into nothing." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then the curator said, "You would condemn your own species to death rather than trust me." "I would condemn my species to extinction rather than walk blind into a trap," Sarah replied. "Now, are you going to give me access, or do we walk away?" The curator's form shifted and changed, cycling through faces faster than before. Finally, it said, "Very well, but understand that what you are about to learn cannot be unlearned. The precursor's final records are disturbing." A panel opened in the floor, revealing a crystalline interface. Sarah approached it carefully and connected her quantum analyzer. Data flooded into her device, vast amounts of information compressed into dense quantum formats. She began to parse through it, searching for anything related to the silence and the precursor's transcendence. What she found made her blood run cold. The silence wasn't a natural phenomenon. It wasn't even a mysterious force. It was a defense mechanism. The universe itself, or something that operated at a universal scale, eliminating civilizations that posed a threat to the fundamental structure of reality. The precursors had discovered that consciousness created ripples in higher dimensional space. When those ripples reached critical density, when a civilization became too advanced, too powerful, too capable of manipulating the fabric of spacetime, the silence responded. It was an immune system. Consciousness was the disease, and the silence was the cure. "They knew," Sarah whispered. "The precursors knew they were going to be targeted, so they fled. They moved to higher dimensions where the silence couldn't reach them." "Yes," the curator said, "and they left me here to preserve other species, to save them from the same fate." "But you can't," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "You can't actually save anyone. You can just delay their extinction. The stored minds will eventually be found by the silence. The restored bodies will just be killed again. This whole facility is just a prison, keeping consciousness trapped in one place where the silence can find it easily." The curator was silent. Stepped closer to Sarah. "Are you saying we're in danger right now? That by coming here, we've painted a target on ourselves?" Sarah pulled up more data, her hands shaking. The precursor's observations showed a clear pattern. The silence targeted civilizations based on their level of active consciousness. The more minds thinking, communicating, advancing, the brighter they shone to whatever mechanism detected them. The Perseverance with its 4,000 inhabitants had been flying under the threshold. But 4 billion restored minds, all thinking and living in one location. This facility is a beacon, Sarah said. The curator isn't trying to save humanity. It's trying to attract the silence. The precursor's final directive wasn't to preserve species. It was to study the silence, to understand how it works, to find a way to stop it. The curator has been collecting civilizations, keeping them alive and concentrated, using them as bait. That's not true, the curator said, but its voice lacked conviction. Sarah turned to face the hologram. Show me your core programming. Show me the precursor's actual directive. For a moment, she thought the curator would refuse. Then data appeared in her analyzer, raw code from the facility's central intelligence. She translated it with shaking hands. The precursor's final command was simple: observe the silence.